Good morning.
Good morning.
اوكي. آه، اليوم حنجرب نخلص small 2D game نعملها. I have the assets on my desktop. مرحبا. I'll send it to you after the session. So هيك بتكون مركزين معي and then you'll do it after the session. I'm recording the screen as well, so you have a reference to work with. Just going to take all of these into Unity, and I'm going to place them in a folder. حسميها assets. Okay. So كله بيصير هون just to keep it organized. Alright. And ما نعرف شغلة كمان when we're working with assets is that these are PNGs, so still images, and we really can't work with PNGs well in Unity, so we have to transform their type into something else. So إذا بتكبسوا على حياة واحدة وبتشوفوا فوق بتشوفوا texture type. Okay, so بتعتبر كل شيء images is textures, and this is not good because نحن it's not a texture, it's something else. نحن it's a sprite, so we need to specify that. So we need to just select everything هون and say texture type بدي اياها تكون sprite 2D and UI. So whenever we're working with 2D or UI, like we want to import in a button or something, we want to create a style, this is going to be a sprite. You also have sprite sheets. When you're importing in multiple images, they're condensed into one single image. It's called a sprite sheet. So عادة بيكون في عندكم different player movements بالsprite sheet, like the running cycle, the walk cycle, and the jumping cycle وهيك with that animation. So they're all بيكونوا into one sprite sheet. So if it's a sprite sheet, you would want to cut it up and then bring it inside of Unity. Or you would want to write a script that actually does it itself. هي بتعمل cutting itself. فيكن تلاقوا كتير اشياء online. You can do that on runtime. So now that it's sprite 2D and UI, we have to make sure we hit apply هون or else it won't save the changes. So we're going to hit apply هون. And as you can see, it just directly when it becomes a 2D sprite, it has this arrow next to it, so signifying that it's a sprite now. So a sprite is like a container إذا بدكم that has the actual object inside of it. So you can have multiple objects inside of this sprite. So إذا كان sprite sheet وكبستوا على الارrow هون بيفتح كل images of the entire sprite sheet. Okay, so let's first start. Now I have an empty game object هون still left from yesterday. Let me just delete that and let's recreate everything نحن from scratch. We just need to make sure that the main camera is on orthographic and the clear flags are solid color because we want it to be 2D. Alright, so that changes the game in جوا to something like this, so it's not 3D بقى game. Cool. Now we need to add either a sprite or an anti-game object and then add a sprite onto it. So I'm just going to right click on it, create a 2D object, sprite. Okay, so a new sprite comes equipped with a sprite renderer. So this is where you render the sprite, the image of the sprite. I'm going to call that background because we want it to be our background. So background. And the sprite, it's none set now. We're going to set it as uncolored, this one. So now we have this. If you go to the game, you can see that we have this background. It's running well. So let's just scale it up a little bit. So probably 1.1 and 1.1. Let's see if that made anything better. That's good. We can just reduce the aspect ratio تبعه. That's fine. Maybe we can make it something like this. هلا بنشوف كيف بنظبط السكيل. It's fine. Now this is the background, and we're going to start adding a couple of other elements. So أول وحدة is we're going to start creating the ground تبعنا. So I'm going to right click 2D. It's going to be a sprite, okay? And on that sprite I have a sprite renderer. بس أول شي حغيرها أسميها ground or something like that. Okay, so there you go. Now we're just going to add, let's say, the sand mid to the sprite on it. And there you go, that's the sprite تبعتنا. Now we're going to add a couple of other elements to it. Okay, now we're going to have a sprite renderer, of course, and sprite renderer, of course, and I'm just searching if we need something else. I think that's it. So just a sprite. Okay, so we need a sprite renderer and we need a box collider, because we need when a box collider 2D, of course. So when the player touches the sprite, it should be it should just calculate that we're not gonna fall through it, right? So now we have this, something like that. Okay, it shouldn't matter on the Z since it's a 2D game. So wherever you put this, I think it's fine. You don't have to put it at the end. Okay, and let's just duplicate that. So Ctrl D. Let's just do it once أول شيء. Okay. Alright, so حسب كيف الكاميرا تبعتكم يمكن تبين يمكن ما تبين. So right, and let's see the game. So something like this. Put this here, and Ctrl D. We put this here. Alright. So now this is our ground. We're just going to get everything هون. Okay. أول شي حنعمل empty game object. حنسميها level. We're just gonna group everything into one empty game object. We just get all the grounds and put them inside of level. So now we have control over them. عندنا مشاكل شوي هون. Just going to delete a couple of them to see شو عم بيصير هون. Okay, so everything. Yeah, they're clipping through each other. Alright, I think that's better. Okay, cool. We don't want them clipping through each other. Right.
فراس.
Yep. سامعك.
why are they disappearing بس تحرك السكرين.
I think it's because of the culling level. في something هون بالclipping planes. I think
اوكي.
في شيء something بالكاميرا, it's a camera option يعني. It doesn't show in the game بس I've seen it does in a way that's weird.
فراس إذا بدنا نشتغل 2D على 3D أفضل نشتغل ب 2D Unity.
هلا this is a 2D Unity بس for some reason it created a camera that's 3D.
مش عارف.
So that's why I changed it on orthographic and solid color. I need to change one more thing بعد. Let's see what it is أصلا. فهاد مرة نعرف كيف نعملها. هلا you can work like that, it's fine, that doesn't matter. It is a 2D project. Projection orthographic, yeah, that's the one. I think if we can just do it like this, is a bit good. And we can just view it from this side. This works. Because it is 2D now. Yeah, that's 2D. Okay, you can just put orthographic on it. Isometric, sorry. And you just need to change the main camera from orthographic, from perspective, sorry, to orthographic, and just clear flag, solid color. I think that's how you do it, yeah, that's how I remember it. Okay, so let's continue with this. Now that's the level تبعتنا. See if there's any. I don't think there's splitting. أصلا it doesn't really matter. So أصلا we can just remove the box colliders من هون. We don't need that. So we just wanna remove component, and then هون على level we just add box collider 2D. So now that should be enough. We can just fix it on it. So box collider is right here. Let's just edit collider and just fix that a little bit. So it can fit the entire ground. Instead of having different colliders for different blocks, we can have one big collider for the entire ground. Okay, good. Now let's add the player to the, and let's create a prefab. So create folder. We're gonna call these prefabs. Alright, and I'm just going to leave it at empty for now. I'm gonna create the player and then add the player into the prefabs. So of course the player is going to be a sprite. Okay, so I'm going to right click to the object sprite. I'm gonna call that player. Right, and I'm going to give it a tag. So tag, I'm going to add a tag. Maybe we'll use it later. عادة we give the player a tag دايما. So let's call that rabbit actually, since it's going to be a rabbit. So now that's the player هون. Let's add a sprite to it. So the sprite is going to be this rabbit right here. Alright, it's not showing yet, so we just need to move that close to zone. To here, maybe we can just scale it down a little bit, 0.7, 0.7. Right, and we'll bring this back to Hone, place it somewhere around here. Maybe a little bit more, let's say 0.6, 0.6. Right, and we're going to add a box collider, of course. So box collider 2D, because we want them to test with the ground and we want it to test with the obstacles that are going to fall from the sky. And we're going to add a rigid body 2D, since you want gravity يمشي عليها. Yes. Yes, مين حكى؟
عندي سؤال.
لا.
إذا عم نعمل game 2D وبالغلط حطينا box collider 3D شو بيصير؟
Nothing. بس يمكن ما تعمل collision. So it's going to mess up with the collision. So you have to be careful that إذا مش عم تعمل collision in your 2D game, you have to check your أول شي بتفكروا فيه إنه why isn't it colliding? First thing that you do is you go and check your components. That's the first thing you do before you start debugging. يعني بتروح بتطلع بتقول okay I have a box collider. So إذا عندكم كان a cube collider هون, that's probably the mistake. So if you're testing against a sprite,
Okay, thanks.
let's see if that works actually. Okay, it does. That's good. So we just fall down and touches the ground. Now إذا كان في عندكم another collider, probably the 3D one, it wouldn't work most probably. So now this is good هون. I think that's all we need. هلا we're going to add an effect هلا هون على ال player when it moves left and right. We're going to add like a effect of movement, a trail basically. So we're going to add later on another component on it. This is good for now. So I'm going to just take that into prefabs. So inside of prefabs, I'm going to click and drag the player into my prefabs. So now we have a prefab player. So now we can just go and pull this player from the prefabs and place it on it. So we can just delete player later on and use it to just instantiate the player from here instead of just keeping it on the scene all the time. And I'm going to go back to assets, create, and this is going to be scripts. Okay, so I'm going to store all my scripts here. We'll focus on the trail renderer later. We're going to add another component, so it's fine. Now I'm going to do another thing. I'm بعمل كل السين for المرة before we start coding, so we don't mess up كتير. So we have the player now, okay, and we have the. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to just add borders هون, border left and border right, just so we don't go off the screen. So at تضربه هون, you just stop moving. So that's easy to do. I'm just going to create an empty, no, not an empty. Maybe we can just create a sprite. Okay, this is going to be something empty. So an empty sprite without a sprite renderer, but we're going to add a box collider to it. Okay, and this box collider is going to be something like this. Box collider. هلا فيكم ما تعملوا sprite, فيكم تعملوا a cube, so you can probably do something like that. So 3D object cube, so we can visualize it better. I think that's better, yeah. So فينا نجي نعمل cube, we can scale it up and place it here, and we can just remove the mesh renderer هون and remove the box collider, and we can add a box collider 2D to it. So it's fine, we can do that. So basically now if I just go ahead and run this game, I can't move. It's fine, we can just place it هون. I'm going to call this border left, right, and I'm going to duplicate that, take it to this side, and call it border right. I wrote right wrong. No, this is good. Okay, so we can't see actually the cube, but it is there. It just doesn't have any mesh renderer on it, so it doesn't render the mesh, which basically makes it invisible. But it is there basically in the sense of it has a transform and it has a collider. So once you hit it, you can just inhibit the player from moving further left or further right. So border left, border right, and we're going to have, so نحن الجيم تبعتنا, things are going to be falling from the sky. Okay, so we're going to have an emitter as in it emits stuff. Okay, so I'm going to right click, create an empty, and I'm going to call that spike emitter. Okay, so because spikes are going to be falling from the sky. So we're going to have a spike emitter, and we're going to place it somewhere lower. So somewhere like this. Spike emitter, so somewhere around here. Okay. Now, bear in mind that the z-axis doesn't really matter in this case since it's 2D. So we don't have to put the z-axis over the bunny or something. It just has to be x and y here because it disregards the z-axis. Now we're going to place it here. So the spike emitter is going to be, as the name implies, an emitter that spawns objects. And these objects are going to be spikes. So هيدي حتكون فوق عم تكب spikes. So we're going to use this point as a basically a way to spawn from it the spikes, and this is going to move. So when this moves in a random pattern, it's going to emit spikes in a random pattern as well. So that's what we're going to focus on. Spike emitter. Now we're going to have, of course, a UI and a restart button وهيك. But before we do that, let's create the spike and then add it to the prefab. So create 2D object sprite. It's going to be the spike, and inside of my assets I'm just going to drag this spike thing onto the sprite, right? And we're going to move it like this. Let's bring this forward a little bit, and okay, so that's the spike taboo now. Now let's make that a little bit smaller, so 0.4 by 0.4. Too much. 0.6 by 0.6 should do it. Okay, that's not bad. Now I'm going to add not a box collider, but a circle collider 2D on it. Okay, and I'm just going to make it this. مش هطلع الcircle collider طلوع لأنه it's unfair. So let's leave it like this, so we can give chance to the player. Now it's going to have a rigid body as well. A rigid body 2D, since it's going to use gravity to fall down. Okay, we're not going to code anything from scratch. We're not going to code the graphics, so we're just going to rely on gravity. Alright, that's the spike. Now, of course, this is going to be a prefab, so assets, prefabs, and I'm just going to place it here, and now we can just delete it, so it's fine. It's a prefab now, alongside the player. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an empty, and we're going to call that game manager. So in most games that you create, في عندكم something called game manager. Okay, and a game manager is an empty game object, not there to do anything except to run the script. So you can't run the script inside of Unity without attaching it to it, attaching this script to a component, basically an empty game object or a regular object. So it needs to be attached somewhere. In this case, it's going to be game manager. So هلا بدنا نخلق a script game manager, we're going to attach it to this entity, game manager. And we're going to create a canvas now. So UI, canvas. So a canvas is basically a way to work with UI. You can't have a button or a text or anything UI based without having a canvas. So everything needs to be inside the canvas so it can render. لأنه it's a different rendering system. يعني these elements that you see هون are different than the elements of UI. They both work in different places, different rendering systems. So ما فيكم تيجوا تعملوا text تحطوا حد الباني هون فوق. No, it doesn't work like that. It works in a different way. So I double click on the canvas, you can see that's my canvas. So that's the game تحت. Alright, that's the game تحت. And that's the canvas تبعولي هون. So now inside of the canvas, I'm going to place my UI texts and whatever. Now keep in mind that this, even if it looks bigger, it's not. So this border right here is this border هون. And this border right here is this border هون. And the center of my canvas is the center of my game. So even if it looks bigger, it's not. It basically fits the entire game. But they make it look bigger like that just so you can work better with it. Okay. So when I make my game bigger, the canvas will scale proportionally بدون ما تحسه. Alright, so بقلب الcanvas I'm going to add a text. I'm going to add a text, so UI, text. Good. I'm going to place 0 هون. Okay, هلا you might have a different font. I don't have any fonts هلا هون. I did have one. You can just download the Kenny's one إذا بدكم. That will be a good font. Now it's blurry a little bit, so let's fix it up. We can horizontal overflow, move it to overflow, and the vertical overflow to overflow as well. And we can just make the size a little bit bigger. So the size of the text, which is the scale. So I'm just going to make it 2, 2, and then scale this up. Okay, so that makes it a little bit clearer. This is going to be the time تبعولنا. So هنحط التايم هون نحنا قد صرنا مضاينين يعني. And هلا في عندكم شيء اسمه anchoring. So anchoring works well with if you wanna work on different devices. So let's say you're working mobile and you want the game to be the same, looking the same thing, having the same text, so without moving the text or anything. When you want to build on a different mobile phone, you'd have to anchor them. So if you're playing on an iPad, it's going to be the same place of text, even if you're playing on a mobile as well. So depending on the reference تبعول الموبile or the iPad تبعولكم, the screen reference, it's going to be placed accordingly. So that's why we just press هون. So I'm going to anchor presets. You have middle, and we can just place it at the top on. So we always know that this is going to be placed on the top center. So depending on the screen, it doesn't matter شو resolution تبعتكم, it's going to always be placed on the center top. Okay, هلا we can reduce شوي نحن this font size. Let's put this on 75. Okay, and we can make this white. So that's the text تبعنا. Now inside of the text, inside of the canvas, I'm going to have a game over screen. So I'm going to right click on canvas, UI, and I'm going to create a panel. And I'm going to call this panel end screen. So this is the end screen تبعتنا. And let's fix the end screen a little bit. So let's make it like this. We'll reduce it من هون. So this is like a pop-up that comes up. And we can just place it in the center right here. Middle center. Okay, so something like this. We can change the color a little bit, make it a little bit darker. And inside of my end screen, I'm going to add a button. So UI, going to add a button. So inside of my end screen, I have a button. I'm going to scale this up a little bit. Right, something like this. And inside of my button, I have a text, right? So I can just put this restart on it. And let's change the text into something better. So when it is blurry like that, keep in mind that you have to change the horizontal overflow to overflow, the vertical overflow to overflow as well. Make the scale a little bit bigger. So the scale of the text, you can just scale it up like this. And let's scale the font. So probably let's put it on 90. And we just make that smaller. So you increase the font size, but you reduce the scale, so that brings you to a better looking text, a crispier text basically. And this is going to be centered كمان as well هون. So let's restart تبرتنا. Now the button, I'm going to move it a little bit to the side. And let's change the color to something like this. Let's put this. Let's put it like this, and now the text is going to be all caps. And it's going to be on white. Just trying to get something nice. You can download a preset يعني وتعملوا لها تحطوا لها السبرايت على البطن دغري بيطلع لكم بطن حلوة. You can download a lot from the asset store. Okay, so this is a button. Now keep in mind that when I created a button, when I created a canvas actually, it created an event system. So if I delete that event system, the button won't press anymore. So if you need to make the buttons interactive and whatnot, you need to keep that event system. So keep it like that, you don't need to worry about it. Now this is going to be off by default. So you see the little check mark for, we're just going to turn that off. We're going to keep it off لأنه by default we didn't lose. So when we lose, we just go here and switch it on and we show the user. Now if I go back to game, هيك حتبين عندي لأنه the canvas is actually based on the game تبعولته. So however the game dimensions change, the canvas will fit accordingly. Okay, so that's the end screen هون تبعولتنا. Event system, that's great. Let's start coding. So بقلب السكريبتس, the first thing that I'm going to have is let's make the player move. Okay, because that's what we want to do. Make the player move basically. Okay, so I'm just going to right click on it, create C#, and I'm going to say player script, or you can call it movement script or whatever. This is good, player script أحسن من movement script, since maybe later on you don't want to just only do movement, you want to do player behavior. Okay, so now I'm just going to go to the player scripts and just drag this player script onto the add component on تحت. So this is going to add a player script. Now let's double click and open that up. Okay, so there you go, player script. Now I'm just going to remove update because we're now going to add a fixed update. So it's going to be void fixed update. Let's not privatize that, we don't care about it too much. So void fixed update, and هون we're just going to add one variable which is going to determine the movement speed. So it's going to be private float movement speed, and let's set it equal to 5f. Now whenever you're working with floats, you're going to have to put f after each number to specify that it's a float, so you can't put it like that. So always put f after each number when it's a float, so you can just reduce bugs. Sometimes it doesn't work if you don't put f. Okay, so there you go, في عندي start هون, and I'm going to create a function called move player. So this is going to be a private, so private void move player. Right, I hit that out. So private void, so void means it doesn't return anything, and this is empty هون, so it doesn't take in anything as parameter. And I'm just going to call move player من هون. Right, so now it's in fixed update, so the movement of the player does not depend on basically the قوة البي سي تبعولكم. Okay, إذا كل ما يكون أول بي سي كل ما يعلى ال FPS, so it becomes faster. So we don't want to do that. Now we want to track the input on the keyboard, right? We already did that in earlier sessions. So if statement, so if input dot get we can just say get key, right? And we're just going to add key code dot left arrow. So left arrow means the arrows on your keyboard. We could have done it like get button down key code dot, or maybe we can have done it like horizontal input. ما بعرف إذا تذكرتوها. So we could have done it like that, horizontal inputs. I'm just showing you different types. So هلا هون it's going to be, so let's say to do move player left, and then هون if input dot get key, it's going to be key code dot right arrow, and I'm just going to say to do move player right. Now let's start moving the player left. Okay, so to move the player, we're going to have to work with its transform. Okay, so the transform is right here. So that's the player تبعنا. We have a transform هون. So we need to move the transform and we need to move the position. So that's how we know. So to move the position, you would need translate. So when you translate something, you move the position. So transform, and keep in mind that I'm working on the player script, and the player script is on the player. So whenever I talk to transform, I'm talking to the player transform and not any other transform. So فينا نجي نعمل this dot transform. So I'm talking to this instance. But since we're inside of the script already, we don't need to put this. So we can say transform dot translate. So transform dot translate, and this is what we're going to translate. Okay, so it takes in a translation and a space and whatever. So we're just going to move with the translation on it. Okay, so it's going to be, since we're moving to the left, it's going to be movement speed. So minus movement speed, because we're moving to the left. And we're going to multiply it by something time dot delta time. Now, and then 0, and then 0. That should work, yeah. Perfect. So what does the statement mean? So we're taking the object تبعنا, which is the player. We're going to the transform, and we're saying translate. So whenever we say translate, Unity is going to think in terms of position. So we're translating the position. And we're just going to say minus movement speed. So the movement speed has been set for. So minus 5 times time dot delta time. So what does this mean? This is, if you don't add time dot delta time, it's going to be based on the frames per second on your PC, of your PC. So movement speed is going to be moving relatively to the frames per seconds on your PC. So that means almost 400 times, 300 times per second. Since this is a small game, and you're not going to cap على 60. So you're going to cap on more, probably 400, 500. So تعملوا minus 5 and then minus 5 each update. Fixed update is going to help with that. It's going to cap it at 60 in this case. If it were regular update, it would have capped it at 400, 500. So 5, let's say 60 times per second movement speed minus 5, you're going to fly off the screen. So you add time dot delta time, just for the sake of moving with time. So خلاص صرنا standardized. We're all moving in terms of seconds rather than frames per second. And we're moving on the x-axis بس. So that's why في عندكم هون this is movement speed times time dot delta time, while these are 0, because we don't want to move on the y on the z-axis. Keep in mind that translate is a vector. It's a vector of 3. So you have the first one, which is x, the second one, which is y, and the third one, which is z. So we'll keep it 0 هون. We don't want to change them. While هون we move on the x. Okay, so let's move it on the right now. So the right should be the same thing, but except putting minus on it, we can remove the minus. So now we're moving in the opposite direction. Okay, let's do that. Great. Now this is for the movement. Let's test that out. Okay, there you go. Now you can just expose the bitcoin. We don't want to make it. We can just make it serializable. So serialize field. This will expose the variable to the outside, or you can just make it public without the serialize field. So now if we just go and look at player script, you can see that we have movement speed, and we can change that. So إذا بيجي بعمل play, and we're testing if the 5 is good, we can bring this down a little bit, and now see the movement speed. Oh, it changed. Okay, I'm going to have to change it من هون لما بلش. So let's put it on 3 and test that to see if it's slower. It is. It's better. So you can now have access to the movement speed, and you can change it to make your game better or whatever. So فيكم تحطوها هون 0, and you can change it from the outside if that's what you want. Alright, so at first it starts at 5. So let's put it at 4 actually. Put it at 4 هون. You don't want it too fast. Okay, so that's for the player script. Let's add another script. So the other script is going to be handling, it's going to be the game manager. So I'm going to just right click and create a C# script. I'm going to call it game manager. Now, keep in mind that when you create a game manager and you call it like this, it's going to change the icon to a gear, because Unity knows that a game manager is going to be handling the game. So that's the convention. When you write game manager like that, Unity will change it to fit to the convention, the body coding. Now, game manager is going to be on game manager, right? Which is the empty game object on the scene. Because if it's not on the scene, on any of the objects, it's not going to run. So that's why we add a game manager empty game object. Now, inside of the game manager, we're going to have a couple of things for like global variables, basically. The first one is going to be, it's still going to be an instance of itself. ذاكرين وقت اشتغلنا باي جيم آخر مدة singleton pattern where تجبره إنه السيستم ما يكون عنده غير one instance of the object. And in our case كانت المين. In this case it's going to be the game manager. So it's better to have a singleton on the game manager since you don't want to create multiple instances of the game manager. And this becomes easier for referencing. When you want to reference the game manager, it becomes so simple. Okay, so let's create a singleton pattern. So it's going to be a public static game manager. Okay, and keep in mind that نحن على game manager. So we're referencing ourselves. So we're on the game manager and we're referencing game manager, and we're gonna call that instance. Okay. And I'm just going to go here and just say, now في عندكم function, في عندكم void start, right? وفي عندكم void update, they come built in inside of Unity. Now void start is when the first frame of the game starts, basically, and it only runs once. Update, it runs every frame. So this is where we do everything calculation, this is where we do everything instancing. There's a previous phase to start, it's called awake. So private void awake. So on awake يعني قبل ما حتى يبلش الفريم, before the frame begins, when it first awakes, basically it runs first. So we can catch it at that state by working with awake. So هون we can check if instance, so that's the variable name, is null. If the instance is null, we're going to say instance equals this. Okay, so خلاص الانستنس الوحيدة صارت على السين موجودة تبعولتي, it's this one. So that's why I say instance equals this. So خلاص, now this is the only instance that I can create. because if I don't create it, if I do create another instance, it's not going to be instance equals null, and this is not going to run. So we don't create an instance anymore. So خلاص, you can only oblige your game to have only one game manager. Okay, now this is for the singleton. So singleton pattern. Okay, and هلا تحت I'm just going to start creating some variables basically. So I'm just going to call that global variables for the game يعني. So internal variables. And I'm going to add a public text. I'm going to call it score text. Okay, so this is going to be our score text. يعني basically when we want to reference this outside and when we want to move it through time or add a score to it or whatever, we're going to talk to this score text. So this is going to be a reference to the score برا. Now عم بيعطينا error هون because I need to import another library .ui. So this will resolve the issue. So we just need to add Unity engine.ui. So we have score text. We're going to create a public integer, call it score. So هيئتنا حنمشي بالسكور يعني خلاص, we're not going to time. And we're going to when the player loses, we're going to spawn the end screen, right? Which is this one. هلا we already have the end screen, we don't need to spawn it, we can just enable it. So هلا it's disabled, this is enabled. So we're going to have a reference to that so we can talk to the check mark on it. So we need to say public game object. It's going to be called end screen. And we're going to have the player, of course. So the player is a prefab. So we're just going to say public game object. And we're going to call that player prefab. So this is the player تبعنا basically. And we're just going to have an internal variable which is going to be private. It's going to be a boolean and it's game over. And it's set to false by default. So because we need to keep track of the state of the game, if it's running or not, we always need to keep track of that. Okay, so these are the global variables. Now let's talk to the end screen. So on start, we're just going to talk to end screen. So end screen, okay, it's going to be dot set active. It's going to be false. So on runtime, when it first starts, the end screen is going to be false. So حتى لو كانت هون the end screen on, it's going to basically تحطها على false. إذا في حال ما طفيناها نحن and this is on by a mistake, on start is going to be false because we don't lose at the beginning, right? So let's start adding some things. So the game manager here, you have a couple of things. So the score text is going to be the text on it. So we're just going to go back to game manager. So the score text is going to be this text. The score is 0 now. The end screen is this one. Okay. And the player prefab is this one. The player. Okay. So we're just connecting them together. يعني خلاص صرنا نعرف this is the text, this is the end screen, and this is the player. Cool. Now, let's see if we can add something else on it. Let's add a game over. Okay, so let's add a game over screen. So قبل الابديت هاجي اخلق a game over screen. So it's going to be a public void game over. It's not going to take anything and it's not going to return anything. So public void game over. Now, what does something happen when we lose the game? شو الشغلة اللي بتصير? Now we're going to do a couple of things. هلا we're going to stop spikes falling. هلا ما كتبنا بعد the spikes بس إنه we're going to stop the spikes falling. We're going to turn off game. Okay, and we're going to just say show end screen. ما بعرف ليه عم صرخ بالcomments بس إنه whatever. So let's leave the stop spikes and let's turn off the game. So turning off the game is as simple as saying game over equals true. So we just set this equal to true, and the show end screen we can just say end screen dot set active true. So easy as that. So when we do hit a spike, we're going to stop the spikes from falling. Okay, it's fine for now. We didn't create the spikes yet, the logic of the spikes, but we are going to turn off the game and set the active screen to true. Now inside of my fixed update, so this is going to be a fixed update and not a update, we're going to check if game over, if not game over. Okay, we're going to increase the score by 1. So add score. So if it's not over yet, the game, we're going to keep adding the score. If it is, we're going to basically stop adding the score, right? Stop adding score. هلا عم نكتب اللوجيك كله هون. Okay, we're just keeping track of the game تبعت. Now we're going to add the score for. And here we're just going to create a function. So instead of just increasing the score plus equals, we're going to add a function. So basically عم جرب قد ما في أعملكم functions because that's how we actually write code. So قد ما فيكم جربوا أسماء functions, and the more functions you have, of course يكونوا efficient functions, the more the logic is going to be straightforward. So هون in add score and stop adding score, we're going to create a function called, of course going to be private, and it's not going to return anything. We're just going to call it increase score, and we're going to send to it the actual score to increase, which is S. So اللي حاعمله is we have the score reference for, which is this one. It's not actually a reference, it's the variable. So internal variable, so we can just say score plus equal S, and that's all we need. So هون I can just reference increase score, and I can send to it 1, let's say. And I can take this now and place it here and say 0, since I don't want to be adding score. So this is good هون. Now let's add one more thing بعد بالgame manager, which is going to be the restart. So we need to handle the restart. Okay, so we're going to create an event called, it's going to be public since we're going to be talking to it. So we're going to need it public, and it's going to be void. We don't want to return anything, and we're just going to say on restart button pressed, something like that, something that signifies what we're going to do, the event that we're going to do. And this is where we're going to do a couple of things. So we're going to set end screen active, right? We're going to reset the score. We're going to basically restart the spikes, because when نرجع نمشي the spike إذا you are, we're going to add respawn player, and we're going to set game to true, set game over to false. Okay, so we need to set the screen end screen active. So basically that's how you move in game development. You just write the to-do list and you just tackle them one by one logically. So شو بدي أعمل وقت أكبس restart button? I wanna set the end screen to not active, to ما بدي, so it's not going to be active. So we're going to disable screen, set, so end screen disable and screen, because خلاص بطلنا خسرانين. So we can just say end screen dot set active false. So we falsify it, we set the score, so score equals 0. We just start from scratch again. And we restart the spikes, we'll do that later. And we respawn the player. So how do we respawn a player? The act of spawning something in games, it's called instantiating. So whenever you want to instantiate something, you can just issue something called instantiate. So instantiate. Now an instantiate, it's a spawning. It takes in a couple of things. It takes in the original object. So in this case, it's going to be the player. It takes in the vector3 position. Okay, so we're going to give it a position on the screen, which is going to spawn the player from. And we can give it a quaternion rotation. Now a quaternion is a big topic in mathematics. ما بعرف إذا وصلتوا له لخلدون yet or la math for games. They talk a lot about quaternions, so I really suggest you guys focusing on them. Make it's fun, they're not too hard. But quaternion is everything that handles rotation, so it's a 4-dimensional matrix. So instantiate, we need to give it a original object. So the original object is going to be the player prefab in this case. So we're just going to give it player prefab. So we need to tell it which object we want to spawn. In this case, it's going to be the player prefab. And we're going to give it a position basically. So because ما تنسوا إنه we need إذا بتقروا ال API هون بتكون object original وبتكون original position. So it's going to be a new vector2. And we're going to send to it 0. And let's keep a track هون of the player. So the player is right here. So let's say we want to spawn this hone. So let's say at 0. And let's say the position is going to be on 1. Okay, so let's say 0, 1, F. Alright, and ما تنسوا انه هو float. Okay, 0 مش ضروري تحطوا له F, it's fine. And we need to give it a rotation. .quaternion.rotation. Where is the rotation? Dot identity. Rotation. Okay, let's close that up. So now we spawn the object, which is player prefab, at this height, 0, 1, at this position, and at this rotation. Okay, now, هون set game over to false. We can just say game over equal to false. And now we set everything accordingly. Now we need to create actually the spikes. So let's do that now actually.
فراس عندي سؤال. شو الفرق بين الفيكس ابديت والابديت عادي؟
The update moves with respect to your frames per second. انت machine قد ايه بتحمل. A fixed update you just cap it at 60. So it doesn't depend on the machine but it depends on how your game runs. So everything when you're trying to do most of the time I use fixed update أنا. But the only time you want to use it انتو إذا بدكم تستعملوها, you use it when you're doing simulations or you're using gravity or you're doing movement or whatever. Because you don't want to move the player at 500 frames per second. It flies off the screen. So you want to move it in increments. So just put it on fixed update, okay? And every time you're working with movement, you're going to have to work with time.delta time هون. Or else كمان it flies off the screen. So keep that in mind. Rotation, movement, any form of translation you would want to use time.delta time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so now we're just going to work with the emitter. Okay, we want to emit. But before we do that, let's go back here to the game manager. Okay, actually not the game manager, the end screen هون. So we're going to go to the end screen, the button, ننزل لتحت بتشوفوا we have an on-click event. So I'm going to just rename that button to restart since we wanna know that it's a restart button. And في عندكم بقلب البutton on click. So this handles the events. When it is pressed, what do I wanna do? This is where I decide. So I just press on the plus on it, and on runtime, the object is going to be. So where is my restart function in? On restart. On restart button press, it's inside of game manager. So I'm going to talk to game manager. So this is going to be the empty game object on it, game manager. So I'm just going to click and drag this and place it here. And the function is going to be inside of game manager, and it's going to be on restart button pressed. So whenever I press on the restart button, an event occurs. We go to the game manager, so game manager dot, so we're inside of the game manager now, game manager dot on restart button pressed. So it's going to come here and do all of these instructions basically. Now we need to focus on something else now. So let's work on the spike emitter, and then we can start spawning the spikes. So the spawn emitter, which is inside of scripts, create C#. So it's going to be spike emitter. Alright, and this is going to be placed on the spike emitter, which is on the screen now. It's an empty game object. So spike emitter is right here. I'm gonna open that up. And we're going to have only one reference and one global variable, which is going to be a public. It's going to be a game object. So whenever you're working with standard, you don't know standard objects in Unity, you don't know which type of object you're referring to. If it's a game manager, if it's a sprite or whatever, it's going to be a game object. So always work with game objects, it's better. So you don't lose, you don't get confused. So always work with game object, and if you want to be more specific, change that. In this case, we were more specific text مثلا. But if you didn't know it was a text, you can just put game object and you can just talk to it as a text later on. So this is going to be a game object. We're going to call it spike. So it's a reference to the spike object that we have in our prefabs. Now on start, what we're going to do is we're going to call something called invoke repeating. Now this is good. It works as a loop basically, and you can just invoke it to stop or to start, okay, or to repeat. So basically, because we want the spikes to emit during gameplay, and we want to stop it whenever we want to stop it. So it always repeats until we say stop. So we're going to call that something create spike, and we're going to send to it, so the method name is going to be called create spike, sorry. So on it's going to be a big S, and we send to it the time, okay, and the repeat rate. So let's say it's 1, just so we can test it out. And the repeat rate قد ايه بترجع بتعيد الفانكشن قد ايه بيتعيط لها. It's going to be, let's say 0.3 F. So F is for float, keep that in mind. When you use decimals you put F. So we have a create spike on it. So now we can just say private void create spike. Right, we don't need to send anything to it. And we can just say, okay, so what do we need to do when we want to create the spike? We want to create it at a random position, and we need to actually create the object. So we need to do two things. We need to make a random function on that can spawn it at different positions, and we want to create the actual object. So we don't need update actually on, because we have invoke repeating. We're good, we're set. We have something going on. So we can just say private void random position. Okay, so what do we need to do on it? we can just say integer rand, let's say, and we can create a random function, so random.range. So we give it a range and the computer chooses basically a randomly between these two numbers. Now the position is going to be from where to where. So that's the spike emitter تبعولتي. So it's going to be from, let's say, a little bit less. So let's say -4 ل 4. So عم بتطلع على x هون. So -4 ل 4. So that's a good range. Maybe we can make it 4.5. Let's try 4 first, and then we'll change it إذا ما حبينا. So -4 ل 4. So it's going to be between -4 and 4. And we're going to... Okay, هلا it's one thing to actually write the -4 ل 4, and it's another thing to actually move the object. So نحن عم نجي نقول له نقي لي number spike emitter between -4 and 4. Let's say نقي لي 2. So we would want to take the spike emitter and place it on 2. So that's how random it's going to be. So it's going to be like that. So هلا بدي مشي الobject actually. So transform dot position. Okay, and I'm going to set it to what? So transform dot position, and I'm going to move the x-axis only and not the y and the z. So it's going to be transform position, and whenever we're working with positions or translations or rotations or whatever, we need to say vector 2. Okay, and then we need to give it what? The rand, which is the one above it, this function, because it returns a number. And we're going to put the transform dot position dot y, the same thing. We don't want to move the position y. We don't care about it. So we're going to keep it the same thing. So the rand, let's say it's 2. So it's going to be, the position is going to be 2. Transform the position dot y. So the transform dot position dot y now is 7.9. Let's put it at 8. Okay, so it's always going to be at 8. It's not going to change. إذا حطيتها 0 كانت نزلت لتحت. So we don't want to put it to 0. We want to put it equal to what it is now, which is 8 in this case. So now we can just say random position that deals with the first obstacle that we have. Now we want to create the object at this position right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate the object, which is called spike in this case on it. So spike, and the position that we have, which is transform.position. Okay, so keep in mind that هون نحن we actually change the position and then we're instantiating the object. So خلاص تغيرنا البوزيشن هون by saying transform.position equals this. So it's always changing basically. So we can just say transform.position. خلاص خلق لي اياها where the spike emitter is. And quaternion.identity, of course. Alright, so we instantiate the object, and now we just need to reference the object to the spike emitter. So the prefabs here, we have the spike, so we can just go to spike emitter, and it's waiting on us to drop a game object in. It's called spike, so I'm just going to click and drop this on it. Okay, now we need to go back to the game manager and handle the spikes, because now when we need to stop the game, we need to actually stop the spikes as well. So هون بالgame over, we need to stop the spikes from falling. So we can just say game object dot find. So we're searching, and what are we searching for? We're searching for something called spike emitter. So keep in mind that we're searching in the hierarchy. So we're searching for spike emitter. Alright, and we find the spike emitter. So we're telling it find spike emitter. It goes there. It clicks on the spike emitter. Okay, great. We're just going to say now dot get component. So the component is the actual components تبعولتها. So transform or spike emitter. We're going to get the component. Which component is it going to be? It's going to be the script تبعولتها, which is spike emitter. Okay. So spike emitter, which is right here. سحبنا spike emitter. Now we can talk to the component, and we can just say dot cancel invoke, and now we just stop the process. So رحنا على spike emitter، so طلعنا لبرا، رحنا على الجيم مانجر، سوري على spike emitter، فتنا على spike emitter هون، فتنا على script وطفينا الانفوك. So now we're not repeating the process anymore. So خلاص we stopped the spikes from falling down. Now we still have one place where we need to restart it. So هون we need to restart the spikes. So how do we do that? We can just say game object. So نفس الشيء game object dot find. So let's just copy that. Okay, so instead of just saying cancel invoke, we don't want to cancel the invoke. We want to invoke repeat. So invoke repeating. So نفس الشيء. We're going to call create spike. Give it 1 and 0.3f, just like we did earlier inside of spike emitter. So now we can just from the game manager نروح على spike emitter ونحكي معه. So كأنه جينا كتبنا هون invoke repeating create spike. بgame manager كتبنا كل هيدي because we want to actually go to the spike emitter and do this call. So if we were inside of spike emitter it would have been like this, but since we're inside of game manager talking to spike emitter, we're going to add all of these. Let's give that a run. Okay, so عم يوقعوا بس ولا ال background تبعولنا. So let's fix that actually. Now the spike emitter, I think it's مشكلة هون. Probably the depth. Okay, so the player is going to be on order in layers, let's say 1. Okay, the background is going to be 0. The level is going to be 1. So all of these, they're going to be 1. Okay, and the player, and let's say the spike emitter, which is the spike on it, it's going to be 1 as well. Player is going to be 1. Let's see if that works. Okay, there you go. Now عم يقعوا هيك and of course they're touching وماشي الحال و everything is going okay. بس أول شي بدنا نعمله إنه يقطعوا الجراوند. So let's say the player is not on 1. Let's say the player is actually on. هلا بنشوف شو بنعمل. يا بنعملها إنه it actually won't touch. It tests with the box collider off the ground and it won't. It would test إنه بيقطع فيها, so we don't need to do anything else. هلا بنشوف شو بنعمل. Maybe you can do it with code. Okay, let's actually do it with code. خلاص whatever. So هون الجراوند. So on the ground, it's going to be level. And let's tag that to something else. So actually, did we tag it من هون؟ No, it's untagged. Okay, so let's just add a new tag and let's call that ground. So ground. And let's put this entire level on ground on it. So now we tagged it as ground. So that's good. So that's what we want. We can just test. If صار في collision مع ground, we just don't do anything. It just goes through it. So we're just going to add a script to the spikes again. So we're going to create a new script. And we're going to call it spike script. Okay, so keep in mind that we two different scripts. We have the spike emitter that actually plays around with the way the spikes are being emitted, and we have the spike behavior تبعولها. So we can add elements to the spike now. So على spike هون, so we're just going to go to assets. Assets هون. Actually prefab. So we want to go to prefab spike, and we want to press on this log for. So we press on this log, and now we can just move around freely while this is still docked. So we go to scripts, and let's add the spike script to it. And let's open that up. Okay, so بالspike تبعولنا we're going to just have an on collision enter because we're testing for collisions, right? So we're going to have an on collision enter. Let's remove the start, we don't need it on. Maybe we'll keep the update. هلا بنشوف. So I'm going to create void on collision enter 2D. Well, it's right here. On collision enter 2D because we're working with 2D. So this is a built-in function inside of Unity. We're testing for collisions. So we just test on if. So this is the variable for Anna. So if collision dot game object dot tag is equal to ground, right? So that's the tag that we actually placed. Okay, so equals ground. We're just going to say destroy game object. Okay, so basically what this does, it destroys the game object, and so when it touches the ground I just delete it. I don't make it go through it. يعني خلص ما عطلنا هم انه turn off the gravity or turn off the collision when we touch the ground. We don't need to do that. We can just say خلص when it touches the ground just delete it.
بس هنا sir البلاير it will not touch the ground.
And that's not the player, that's spike. So when the spike the obstacle touches the ground we just delete it because we don't want it to stay on the ground. إذا انتبهت قبل كانوا كلهم عم يوقعوا على ground and they're staying there. Okay, so else if there's another behavior basically, if collision dot game object dot tag equals rabbit, so if it touches the rabbit, right, because we want to actually do something when it touches the rabbit. Okay, keep in mind that we're working with tags نحن. So this is tagged as player هون. I think بقلب الassets بقلب prefabs. Player. Let's tag that as rabbit. Okay, so this is tagged as rabbit, this is tagged as ground. So if we do touch something, so if the spike does collide with the rabbit, what do we have to do? We have to first remove the rabbit from the game. Remove the rabbit. Remove the spike. So I'm just thinking in terms of fake step by step. يعني we want to remove the spike. Yes, and we want to end the game.
انا بس بدي اقول لك انه مضطر فل، بس انه حتكفي يعني بالشرح ولا كيف بدها تصير الخبريه؟
حاسحب فيها تخلصها للجيم لانه اخر سيشن نحن اليوم و
اخر سيشن اليوم. اوكي
اوكي سو اللي بده يفل I don't mind بس I'm going to complete the game اللي بده يبقى معي. اوكي
يلا اوكي
alright. So I'm going to end the game, remove the rabbit and remove the spike. So let's start by removing the rabbit first. So I can just say to remove the rabbit, basically I can just say to remove the spike first. So let's remove the spike. So we can just say destroy. What do we need to destroy? Collision dot game object. And honey, we need to remove the rabbit, so we're going to say destroy game object. Okay, so it destroys the game object. This is the prison corner, just so you don't get confused with these. Okay, now we're removing the game object, and now we need to end the game. So to end the game, we need to talk to game manager. Now since game manager we did it as a singleton pattern, so now the game Unity knows that game manager is just one instance of the game, so we can only talk to this instance and it knows that. So فينا نجي نكتبها بهالطريقة game manager dot instance dot game over. So game object game manager dot instance dot game over. Boop, and خلاص وقفت لي اياها. So that's good. That's why we use design patterns like this. في عندكم كذا design pattern, this is one of them. So this is good هلا spike script. Now let's give that a run. Maybe we can add a few things. So player, we're good. Game manager, we're good. Okay, let's give that a run. So when it touches the ground, it deletes, and when it touches the player, it deletes the player and the spike. Okay, هلا هون this border left, we're going to have to move it a little bit to this side, and the border right a little bit to this side, since the spikes were touching them. We don't want the spikes to touch them. Okay, so ground, touching the ground, touching the game object. Let's give that a run. أنا ما شفت شيء. Okay, so there you go. Now we just need to make the score work and the game over screen to start. Now أنا كاتب كل اللوجيك هون لازم يكون ماشي الحال. So end screen is equal to false. Start. So end screen is set to active. Let's put this on first. We'll play that. Okay, we just need to make the end screen to start. To
نحن مش كاتبين شيء انه لما يموت الرابط بهذا.
نحن كاتبين
كاتب
هون actually.
اللوجيك بس مش حاطط انه اذا مات الرابط تعمل الاند
حطينا هون collision.gameObject.tag equals to rabbit. We just destroy the spike, destroy the rabbit, this is what's happening, and we need to we need to go to game over and end game manager. So game manager, need to go to game over, and we need to turn off the game end screen and start spikes from falling. Game over.
هيدي مش عم تعمل.
It is running but it's not turning on the screen لأنه إذا ضربت بالرابط. لا it's not لأنه it's still بعد spikes عم يوقع, so it's not.
ما هو
we're not cancelling the invoke. Yes. So game over equal true. I'm missing something probably من هون. Something super simple كنا فايته. So it is moving. Okay. Start. We set the end screen to active, to false, and then we just go to game over. We find the spike emitter. Let's see if we wrote spike emitter صح. أنا كيف كاتب spike emitter هون؟ كتبها غلط شفته. So that was the problem. So let's just go. Yeah. So let's just fix that من هون and see what happens. Okay, so there you go. It actually works now. So let's hit the restart. It restarts from scratch. Okay. Without the collisions and without the movement. شوف شو صار يجي هون. Okay. So if I restart, I don't actually have movement inside of my game and I don't have collisions anymore. So there's something.
ما رجعناش عملنا.
Set active.
هو كلهم ببلاير صح؟ بلاير مش عم يمشي بقى.
بس why؟ ليه مش رح يمشي البلاير هون؟ Maybe game manager. Let's check the restart screen. So we just end screen and set active false.
عملت restart للspikes وعملت respawn
هون. We didn't change that tone actually كمان as well. Hey, this is still wrong, right? Did I actually change that? Create spike.
لا ظبطت اللي برا. ماشي اللي برا.
ظبطت اللي برا. Yeah, that's right. So هون create spike. So let's check again the game manager. So the start button, set active, score 0. We find the spike emitter and get the component spike emitter.
انت بس عم ترجع تعمل respawn للبلاير. So البلاير script.
Yes, you're right. That's it. هون the prefabs. So هيدي this is going to be حطينا السكريبت هون. So عادة we just لازم نشتغل نحن من هون directly. We avoid confusion. So the script is on it. We can just put the player script on it. That should work now inside of the movement. And now we
نحن
should
عم
tag
نرجع
it.
نعمل ريسبوند للبريفاب بس البريفاب ما فيها
Exactly.
السكريبت تبع البلاير.
100%. That was the issue. Exactly, yes. And we still have one مشكلة, which is basically inside of the prefab player, we didn't tag it. We need to tag it as rabbit. So now it should work. Yeah, that's it. Okay. That's good, yes. Now movement speed هون تبعولنا كان غير لأنه بالprefab it was 4 هون البلاير صار 2 movement speed. Maybe we wanna change that.
البلاير اول ما بلشت 8 يمكن معقوله لانه فيها 2 بلاير سكريبت. فيها 2 بلاير سكريبت 4 و4.
This player. لا ما this got deleted, right? So this got deleted. So the player got deleted and instantiated another player. So when will player?
ايه بس قصدي اللي نحن حاطينها على السين فيها 2 سكريبتس للبلاير.
حاطين 2 scripts. كيف حطيت؟ ايه لانه في حاطط وحده بقلب البريفاب. حاطط وحده. Okay. Now that works. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you for being vigilant with me. Okay, so that's it. Now, what do we need to do? So the score is not being added. So increase score. If it's not game over, increase score 1. And if we stop the game, we increase the score by 0. We need to play with the text around بعد. عم نعمل score plus S, but we're not talking to the text actually. So let's start adding the text. So هون I think بقلب fixed update. So we're just going to talk to score text, which is this one هون. So score text dot text. So لأنه score text. So the text. If you have text بقلبه. So we're talking to this component now. So score text dot text is going to be equal to score and plus a string. So it doesn't give us an error لأنه score is an integer or a float basically. And text takes in an integer only. Sorry, a string only. So we're just going to say plus an empty string just so we can convert it from a float to a string, if that makes any sense. Okay, so we restart that, it restarts from scratch. Now, of course, في عندنا مشكلة game design, but we don't care about that. We can just leave it as is. Now let's add a trail renderer to the player. So we go to the player prefab on it and we add something called trail renderer. Now this is basically when it moves تعمل حواليها trail بتلحقها بتصير يعني. Now let's look at the options a little bit. Maybe we can work with that. So 5 0.1 emitting, it is emitting, so that's good. Now the color is like this. We're just going to bring down the transparency. Just going to bring down the transparency, which is from the transparency is where. So you can see that you have a شو بسموها. It's basically like Photoshop. It's the opacity. So maybe you can just press on it and reduce the alpha. Yeah, that's the one. Let's reduce the alpha from both sides, and we'll see what happens. So 0 0. That's right. View stretch. Okay, now هعمله is I'm just going to bring this down to 0.4 actually. Okay, and I'm just going to click and drag from this side if I can. I think for بس أنا مش مستعملها هيدي. Let's see what happens on. Okay, so you can see في trail لاحقة. Okay, بس no, it's a bad trail. Let's we need to fix that actually. So maybe we can on element 0. We need to change the material. So let's change that to. I think we have it inside of our assets. Nope. So prefabs. Trail renderer. Let's change this element to sprites default. Let's try sprites default. Let's try that. Alright.
It's
Default.
not fast enough لتعمل تريل حسيت.
Probably something like that. بلشت أول شيء لأنه رجعت وقفت.
ايه ما هو.
So this is on, off. عم شوف بس إذا probably أنا أوقات بتغير هون. So camera motion only. No, we need to say per object motion. That seems logical. And the sorting layer. Maybe we need to create a sorting layer. Let's do that actually. So let's go back here. And the layer. Sorting layer. Oh no, مش هون layer. Sorry, sorting layer is inside of Mars Sprite Renderer.
شغالة من البريفاب احنا نرجع
ما هو هيك. Let's do it now. خلص نعملها من هون. So sorting layer. Let's add another sorting layer. Let's call it foreground actually. Everything على foreground بكون sorting layer foreground. Okay, so we go back to player هون and we say sorting layer تكون ال foreground تبعنا. And now we can go back to the to the train and just say sorting layer I want it to be on foreground. Let's see. I think it has to do with this. Let's change the alpha. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we just need to make it decay a little bit faster. If we can just find out where the decay is, I think.
بالأول.
هون أكيد هيدا بس إنه I think. Let's reduce the time actually. 0.5. Let's put this at 0.5. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, هلا.
رجع الألفا بتصير تبين ألذ.
I think the alpha. You're right. Probably the alpha is fucked up a little bit. So the alpha should be.
color.
هون. Let's put this alpha هيك. We'll see how it looks like. هلا why is it rectangular? I think I can change that. هو مشكلة هون I guess.
ركب التكستشر مود stretch.
Texture mode stretch view stretch.
انت الماتيريال يمكن حاطط شيء.
حطيت واحدة default بس تنقدر نجرب يعني maybe في something better ما بعرف. Sprites default. Let's put 9.
technically مش بتكون هي default rectangle sprite.
Yes, I think so. You think we should default? What's that particle? Let's try that actually. Why not? Since we're experimenting. That's a little bit better. I think. خلاص, let's leave it like this. It's fine. بس مهم ما يكون rectangular يعني. That's what I want. هلا كنت بتذكر من زمان كنت تزبط كتير مع التريل. كنت قاعد اتسلى فيهم بس now صار لي سنتين مش عامل شي training like this. So it's fine. بس keep in mind that if you spend some time on particles and training تطلع لكم اشياء كتير حلوة. Okay, we're not going to spend صرنا وحدة إلا تلت. So let's just add trail to spike. The spikes. So prefabs, spike. Let's add a trail to it. So trail renderer. I need to figure out a way how to change these. How do I add a point on it? Because I'm pretty sure is I added a point on it. About add key, that's the one. Okay, so I can just bring this down like this. Now, let's put this at 0.4. Alright, so on here, let's put this at 0.5. Camera motion per object motion. Sorting layer foreground. And the material is going to be, let's put this again, نشوف شو بصير معنا. Yeah, that's a little bit better, right? No, يمكن the color is off a little bit, so let's just change the color. Let's put it to this color. Well, the logic works. ما اشتغلنا كتير على الديزاين, it's fine. Let's move that actually a little bit. And let's set this to center. So now it's centered بتكون شوي, and let's reduce شوي the font size 70. Scale it down a little bit. Okay, that's a little bit better. Now let's fix the background, the ground. Let's place the ground تحت. So بس نعملها شوي أحلى يعني مش أكتر. So the ground, I'm going to bring this down a little bit. So لهون. The player, I want to move that down a little bit.
عامل تريل وراه
ما it's real time rendering, so let's check the game هون. I really consider you
علي
working.
فوق الباك جراوند حاسسها من فوق
ما هو هيك بس تركتهم للآخر بس تظبط اللوجيك. ما بدي أركز على الديزاين كتير وانسى اللوجيك. So this is good. هلا هون بفتكر بالديسبلاي, let's create another display. Let's make this 1024 by 1024 نحنا. So let's make it 1000 by 1000. هلا إذا بحطها 4 by 3 this would not work. 3 aspect, nope. So we just need to reduce it, yeah, that's it. So instead of 1000 by 1000, maybe we can do it. So width and height, let's just reduce the height. Let's make it 900. Let's do that again. شوف إذا كيف عم تنزل معها. بتنزل معها. Okay, so that's not what you want. Make the player back up. And added that, put this on 100 based on مش aspect ratio. Let's put it on 1 by 1 aspect ratio. Okay, let's move the background لكين لطلوع وخلص just ما بعرف ليه عم نعمل هيك بحالنا. Okay, excuse my dog. Okay, so now صارت التكست كتير كبير. We focus, let's redo the text and we'll end it. So هون text, we'll move it up. Let's scale this down. This. Okay, so well, we have a game. Yeah, I think that's good. All right. Let's see if we can walk off. We can. And I just opened مشاكل تاني علي هلا. Going to have to fix these. I think لا no من ورا هيك. So let's just bring them down. This here. Bring this down and put this here. We should be good by now. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, actually we're just going to let's add one more thing actually. قلت بدي احطها كنت وما رجعت حطيتها. Let's do that now. Let's add rotation since we don't know how to rotate نحن بعد transform. So we can just add rotation. Now بالspike script we're just going to add هون a private and let's say float. So private float and call that rotation speed and set that equal to 2 at first. So I think 2 is enough. And then هون بالupdate I can just say transform.rotate and I can rotate. So I want to rotate. How do I want to rotate? So I want to rotate. Let's rotate that. So I'm rotating on the Z. Okay, great. So I want to rotate on the Z. So it's going to be 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, and rotation speed on the Z. So now they're going to rotate while the spikes are falling down. As the spikes are falling down. So, okay, they rotate down. It looks better than whatever. Now with the player, I don't want it to be constrained. I want to constrain it on the rotation. So هون rigid body constraints. I want to freeze the rotation. I don't want it to rotate. So إذا وقعت في حال وقعت it doesn't rotate sideways. Okay. We need to bring down the player of course كمان. هون بالgame manager. So we want to instantiate the player. We don't want to instantiate it طلوع على القد. So when the player تبعوني أنا. Player is right here. So let's put this at -2 actually. So instead of 1, we can put this at -2.1, let's say. So now when it spawns a little bit closer to the ground. Yeah, that's good. Alright guys, I think that's enough يعني ما بعرف شو بدي زيد بعد. طلعنا على كل شيء اليوم. We wrote a big game. طلعنا على score, طلعنا على variable naming, طلعنا على movement, invoke. And we work with the UI تبع Unity, so that's good. So هذا السيشن عم تتسجل هلا. So I'm going to edit it طلع لكم اياها. ووقت اعطيكم البروجكت حاعطيكم شيء على نسقه. So حاعطيكم شيء 2D بس انتم you're going to download your assets and create your stuff. تعملوا a fully functioning game and I think we will be set يعني for this semester in terms of Unity. If you want to stop recording.